Awesome. Hello. Welcome everybody to another one of our Viral Moment LinkedIn Live webinars, which I am super excited are actually working, which is great. So I'd love to see everybody attending, hopping on, and learning more just about what's happening in social video, what's happening across trends, mostly across TikTok. How is it influencing culture and brands across a whole variety of sectors, from fashion to coffee to cosmetics, and now we're here to talk about candy, which is awesome.
One of my favorite topics.
I know, we love snacks. We love snacks.
Snacks on snacks on snacks. Yes.
Snacks on snacks on snacks. Fabulous. We're here today with Richard Wright from Cogents, which is amazing. They do an incredible job diving into data and really understanding research analytics about what's trending, why it's trending, how is it evolving. And we're going to go into all of that with snacking and candy here in just a moment. So I am super excited to bring everything up on stage, and let's kick this thing off.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth and Chris. Thanks for that introduction. Elizabeth, I should have shared some slides with you. You should have them available shortly.
Let me do that here. Oh, I see the StreamYard in the back end. There it is. Perfect.
There you go.
This
is how you know it's live, right here.
We did it. we did it, y'all. This is great. All right. Great. Welcome to Munching on TikTok Moments, Snacking and Candy Trends Q2 of 2024. So I'm Elizabeth, Head of Growth here at Viral Moment. I am met with Chris, our partnerships lead here at Viral Moment as well. Some of the best jokes are probably going to come from him. I'm not a comedian.
Best or worse. There's no in between.
We're also here with Richard, who is representing his company Cogents, which we'll talk about in just a hot second, about all the amazing stuff that they dive into. So very quickly, Viral Moment, if you're new to joining us here, what we love to do is we love to trend surf. We love to supply you with this amazing amount of data that combines the art and science of anticipating the consumer so that you can create at the speed of culture. Our whole goal is to make sure that your company, your brand is relevant, is making sense for the audience that you want to be in front of. And we do that by looking through social video. This time we're looking through TikTok and YouTube Shorts to understand a specific conversation. So whether you want to talk about fashion or candy like we're doing today, or maybe you want to look into something like sports or the Olympics, or Christmas, Halloween, like you name it, we can go ahead and dive into that data for you. We can pull up the topics that are most interesting to you and your brand and the cultures that you want to be a part of. And we can teach you and show you how you can trend surf and how you can work with some of these amazing people like Cogents to really get some of the best details and most important insights from this data, so that you know how to better move forward with your brand. So that's what we do here at Viral Moment. And I'm kicking over to Richard, actually, talk a little bit about what they do at Cogents.
Great. Thanks very much, Elizabeth and Chris. And thank you to everyone who's attending today. I know it's morning for those in the US, and it's kind of approaching late afternoon for those in the UK, and even later afternoon for people a little bit further east. I would just like to spend a few minutes or a few moments talking a little bit about where we fit in kind of the food chain of understanding social media conversation. We're based on the southernmost tip of Africa in Cape Town, in South Africa. We have been working to make sense of social media conversation for the best part of 15 years. We tend to primarily work with C-suite executives to help them understand and structure what can be a very chaotic and noisy environment. This cover that I've got up on the screen now is from The Economist, dated February the 27th, 2010, and really speaks to the role we see ourselves playing with our clients, and that is making or bringing structure and sense to a very unstructured environment, and essentially watering a metaphorical flower. Sorry, I'm getting my words mixed up there. And that flower is our client's business. A couple of years ago, I received an email from one of our clients with this tweet. And this tweet has stuck with me ever since, because it does a really good job of capturing certainly some of the early confusion around exactly what TikTok was and why it was so popular. This tweet sat with me, and I really had to kind of think through how do I explain, or how do we explain where TikTok fits in from a social media perspective to our clients. Important to remember or to acknowledge that often C-suite execs are actually not on TikTok or on other social networks for that matter. So they are coming into this completely green, and they need a lot of hand-holding. Or hand-holding might be the wrong term, but they need a lot of explanation as to why these platforms and the content on these platforms are important. What we explained then, and still holds true to now or today, is that TikTok is fundamentally different. Okay? It is a different platform to the other social networks. And perhaps the best way, or the best example I've seen of this difference came through in a New York Times article that was published in April this year. This article is extensive, it's long, it's researched, it's massively in depth, but there's literally 2 sentences that capture the fundamental difference of TikTok better than anything I've seen. And that is that TikTok didn't build itself around social connections. Its goal is pure, uncut entertainment. Okay? Once you have that understanding or that appreciation, it makes sense. The DNA of TikTok was not built on allowing you to see the content that your friends are sharing or the people you're following. It is built around serving you content that will entertain you. And it does that using the much discussed TikTok algorithm. And I've heard more than one person say that the TikTok algorithm knows them better than they know themselves. What does this mean? You've got this platform built into its DNA, entertainment. Because of that, pretty outrageous things can trend on TikTok. The more outrageous, the more bizarre, the better. We've seen all sorts of trends. Okay, they're really fascinating trends. I don't know if you guys have seen this particular trend. From a sociological perspective, this trend is actually quite, well, it's scary. This was a trend where women were being interviewed, randomly interviewed, impromptu interview, and asked one question. And the question was something along the lines of, if you were stuck in a forest and you had to choose whether there was a strange man that you don't know or a bear with you in that forest, which would you choose? And most women, and when I say most, I think it was 90% plus, chose the bear. Rather terrifying. Similar kind of, another fascinating trend. Also not long ago, I think this was about 2 months ago, similar format in that men were impromptu interviewed, literally walking down the street, and asked how often they think about the Roman Empire. And apparently it's all the time. Personally, I don't think about the Roman Empire that often, although with the Gladiator movie, or Gladiator 2 coming out, I find myself thinking about it a bit more frequently now than I did last week or so, last month.
Every so often, I like to throw in a good "Are you not entertained?" and then usually it's just to myself, and that's about it. But
yeah. Speaking of entertainment, I've now dropped a very annoying earworm into your ears as an example of a frivolous trend. Okay, I'm looking for a man in finance. I think we've all heard that song. I find it very annoying, but it is frivolous. It's fun. Another example of a frivolous and fun trend, broccoli freckles. Okay, a little bit bizarre. People were literally dipping broccoli into makeup and applying makeup using a stem of broccoli, which gives them a kind of freckled effect. But there are also dangerous trends. Okay. This one, particularly disturbing, bone smashing. And this is people literally smashing their face to rearrange their jaw so that they have a more prominent jaw to make them look more attractive. Similarly, a whole bunch of people in the UK in particular were eating fried toothpicks because TikTok or people on TikTok were doing it. Okay, not very safe.
Yeah, not all trends are trends you should do.
No.
I think kids don't.
Elizabeth, I couldn't agree more. Just because it's trending on TikTok doesn't mean you should do it. Often, actually, when you're a bit older, it means you probably should avoid it.
Right. It reminds me of the healthy Coke trend, right? Of like, what was it, like soda water and balsamic vinegar, and people are like, oh, it tastes just like Coke. And everyone else is like, what are you doing? What is happening right now? It tastes awful.
Yeah. Well, I can't even imagine what that tastes like, actually. But it's a weird fascination. I might try it after this. Anyway, the point is that TikTok has become a trend factory. The entertainment element built into its DNA has meant that things trend far more quickly and far more frequently on TikTok than they do on other social networks that we've seen previously. I sat and tried to think through a visual that would describe or that would capture this for you. And I I put this together. This is a graph that is capturing the number of news headlines that mentions TikTok and trend in the headline over the last 13 months. And that's put alongside X, Instagram, and Facebook. Okay. What this is telling you is that certainly at the moment, trends are born on TikTok. They then, and that speaks to the tweet I shared earlier, they're born on TikTok and then they move on to other networks. But if you think about 30,000 articles that mentioned TikTok and trend in the headline, whereas the next biggest is X, and that's just under 4,000. That's quite something. This trend factory, or this platform, what it's doing is it's shaping consumption and purchasing behavior across lots of different industries. Okay? People are reading books they never used to read before because of BookTok. People are traveling to places they've never been because of TikTok. Well, not never been. They never wanted or previously thought of going to because of TikTok. People are wearing different clothes. Their entire fashion sense is changing because of TikTok. And what we're going to talk about today is that the way people eat is also changing. It's changed, and because of that, the food industry is having to change as well. Okay, so that's a bit of a background, or not background, just contextualization as to why TikTok is important and why we spend a lot of time thinking about platforms and what makes them important for our clients, for C-suite executives. Viral Moment. We've partnered with Viral Moment for the last couple of months, and we find this platform particularly useful particularly useful for us to analyze TikTok content. We find the platform itself very crisp, very clean, and very visual. What we've done is we used Viral Moment to collect a sample of data around snacking and a sample of data around candy. Before I actually show you the data sets themselves, I just want to spend a moment talking a bit about the methodology because it's quite important. Viral Moment works, it returns content to you based on searches that you program into it, but the searches have to be hashtags. Okay, so we sat down, we brainstormed a list of hashtags for snacking and a list of hashtags for candy. We came up with 117 snacking hashtags and 63 candy hashtags. We intentionally avoided putting any brand names into the hashtags. Okay, so that was an intentional choice. We wanted to look at the category rather than brands. In each data set, both snacking and candy, the hashtags had to make specific mention of snacking or of candy. So that gives you an idea of how these data sets were compiled. And the date range was was quarter 2 of this year. So that's May, June, and July. Snacking, 48,000 posts were returned, which is a very healthy sample. You can really roll your sleeves up and dive into that data set to get an understanding of what's going on there. Candy, slightly smaller data set, 16,000 posts, but I wouldn't be misled by that or read too much into that actual number, the 16,000 versus the 48,000, because if you actually look at averages in terms of views and engagements per video, the Candy content was more popular. On average, Candy got more views and more engagements per video than snacking did. Okay, so don't be misled. Don't take this as evidence that the Candy conversation is smaller than snacking. It isn't. That number might just be smaller because we searched fewer hashtags in the sample.
I actually think, Richard, this is really interesting. So we see this too, just even if we're looking at, comparing brands or competitors over time or something like that, the number of posts does not necessarily equate to engagements or views. And this is a great example of that. Even with less total number of posts, the engagements are higher, which is really what you want to see. It's like, how are you actually attracting the right audience? And so Candy is just like this niche part of the snacking and food and beverage kind of umbrella as a whole. And I think that's just an interesting point to lean into a little bit, is the number of posts doesn't equate to more.
No, it doesn't. No, the number doesn't equate to popularity. And we'll see in a couple of slides' time some very interesting data points around that. We found that the most viewed content, the top 1% of the most viewed content, attracted a massively outsized share of the views. But I'll talk to that in just a second.
Yeah, and we have a question here too about from Luke. He's asking, how are we defining snacking and candy? Can you just snippet on how you defined both of these categories?
Sure, no problem. So, as I mentioned slightly earlier, we put together a list of hashtags. So for the snacking data set, we put together a list of 117 hashtags that mentioned snacking. And there's 117 different variations of that. But the key thing is it had to mention the word snacking. Okay. And the same with candy. For a post to be considered part of the snacking data set, it had to mention snacking. For a post to be considered part of the candy data set, it had to mention candy in the hashtags associated with the posts, with the videos. The first insight that we stumbled on quite quickly was that consumers don't distinguish snacks from candy as clearly as marketers do. Okay, so insight here is that, and this actually probably goes some way to answering the question from Luke, is that TikTok users see candy as a snack. Okay, so going back to these two data sets, 48,000 posts about snacking, 16,000 about candy. Within that, 7,500 mention both snacking and candy in the hashtags. Okay, so just under half of the candy data actually mentions snacking in the hashtags. And I've got two examples of that for you here. Okay, so this is candy, very clearly candy, M&Ms, and some form of marshmallow or a freeze-dried candy. This user refers to it as a bar snack, and this user refers to it as candy, but then also uses the snack hashtag. Okay. The second insight, and I touched on this a few moments ago, the top 1% of the most viewed videos generated a massively outsized share of the total views. Okay. For snacking, the top 1% of the videos accounted for 60% of all the views in the data set. Okay. For candy, it was a little bit smaller, but the trend remains. The top 1% of the candy data set accounted for 46% of all the views in that data set. Okay. We focused our analysis on the top 1%. We see the top 1% as the content that went viral, and we focused our analysis there. Within that, so we're looking at the top 1% here, the most viewed content, literally the content that went viral. Within that, we identified 4 popular video formats. Now, I know that this whole presentation or this whole webinar is looking at TikTok trends, but we thought there may be more value in positioning what are the popular formats above trend, because trends are so fleeting. There's so many of them, they're ever changing, and they can be dizzyingly confusing. So what we've done, and what I'll talk you through for the rest of this webinar, is we identified the 4 popular video formats. And within that, what are the trends that were popular? So, and I'm just going to pre-warn you, we're saving the best for last. I'm going to lead up to the most popular format, which we'll talk about at the end of the webinar. Firstly, challenge. Okay, the challenge format. I'll speak a bit about the challenge format, and then I'll give you some examples of what we saw. So, key elements of the challenge format is that there's group participation. Okay, it involves a group of people getting together to gamify and personalize a trend that they've seen previously on TikTok. The personalization element can happen both at the individual level, but as well as the group level. The best example of trends in this format, or the most popular trend in this format in Q2, was the candy salad. Okay. I'm sure you've all seen the candy salad. It has been around for a while. It predates Q2 2024. But what we saw in this quarter was very popular candy salads, or candy salads being used to celebrate particular events. We've got examples like the bachelorette party candy salad. This is when you've got a bride and all of her bridesmaids and friends dropping candy into a bowl. And the personalization element here is each person or each participant will choose a candy that they prefer, that's their favorite, and then the bowl gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and more outrageous, or more and more impressive. Similarly, another celebration element, the school candy salad. This was we saw quite a lot of young users sharing candy salads from the last day of school before the summer holidays. Same thing here, people pouring candy into a bowl to try and create this very impressive salad. Sometimes, or not sometimes, often, trends evolve. We saw this trend evolve, and we're seeing it evolve in quite a dark way into Q3 this year. This variant of a candy salad has been called trauma dumping. There are lots and lots of examples of this all over TikTok that are actually quite dark and quite disturbing. But what we've done is we've tried to find a more lighthearted example for you, which I'll actually play for you now, so you can get a feel for this format and a feel for this trend.
When I was 6 months old, my mom fed me an edamame. It got stuck inside my throat. They rushed me to the hospital and performed surgery on me. And ever since, my vocal cords have been permanently damaged.
When I was 4 years old, my parents left me in the back seat of a hot car. It took them 2 hours to realize they'd forgotten me.
My brother has broken 4 of my fingers, 3 of those being shut in a door, and 1 of them was on my birthday.
When I was 18 months old, I fell out of the car. I was standing next to my mom, and I leaned over. I was standing up in the seat, leaned over, opened the door, and I started rolling down the road. My mom looked up in the rearview mirror and saw her 18-month-old baby going just like that. And she stopped, went back, got me, blood all over my face. It's very traumatic.
I think you get you get the gist here. People are, and the gamification element here, and this particular trend is people are sharing their trauma, and the trauma gets more and more traumatic And as they do that, they pour candy or their trauma, their metaphorical trauma, into the bowl. Not surprising that this particular trend has caused a fair amount of concern amongst mental health practitioners.
This is terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard not to pause on this one and dive into this a little bit. We went from like
breather here. Hold on.
Yeah, right. We went from like celebrating these like marquee moments, which like by the way, I think I might just do. It's like, hey, it's Friday, and I'm gonna be like, bam, I'm just gonna make my own personal candy salad because I'm just gonna celebrate Fridays, right? But we went from like celebrating these like marquee moments to, you know, weddings and bachelorettes, which again, I wish TikTok was around. Or was a little bit more popular. This trend was available when I got married, because I definitely would have encouraged my groomsmen to do the same for me. To like everyday moments at school, right? And I think there's, in both instances, this is very communal aspect, this positive communal aspect of it, and then it's now progressed or evolved, however you want to label it, to saying, hey, this is one of the worst things that's ever happened. You know, this is one of the things that I've struggled with, or one of the things that's happened to me. And you can tell it's even difficult for me to even talk about it. Right. So what do brands do here? Like how do brands encourage consumers, especially knowing there's a younger demographic here, to go get the professional help that they may need, or to go seek the counseling or talk to someone that they may need to?
Yeah. So Chris, that's a very hard question. I can't listen. I'm not a mental health professional. I can't offer advice to brands. Well, I can't answer that specific question. But what I think is important is that brands are aware that it's happening, and tools like Viral Moment allow them to be aware. It also speaks to the unpredictability of trends. No one can predict what's going to trend. Trends evolve, trends morph. To be always listening, always monitoring, I think if you are a consumer-facing brand, is vitally important.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important too to make sure that you are listening and understanding what's happening. Because you don't want to come off as tone deaf. You don't want to be a brand that's maybe a step behind on like the candy salad trend, which it's lasted a long time, like initially. Yeah. So you could have hopped in, you know, even a couple of months after it initially started and still have been part of that conversation. But if you hit it at the wrong time, when all of a sudden the trauma dumping version of this started to come in, your brand could actually come off as tone deaf. And then you could end up in some hot water where people are like, wow, I can't believe that like this brand did this, like when everyone else is like actually talking about the drama, like why don't they care about us or the consumer, etc. So to your point, Richard, it is really important to like stay on top of trends, listen to the communities and the content pillars and the cultures that matter to your brand, so that you can fit in at the right time and have fun, or do what you might need to do to make sure that your consumers are in a healthy place mentally.
Exactly, Elizabeth. It's all about context, isn't it? Without the context around this, you could make a big mistake as a brand. Anyway, moving on. Chris, sorry, Chris, do you have a question?
Nope, go for it, Elizabeth.
Oh, I was going to take Chris's question from him.
Okay.
One mind. But we're wondering, so that was one challenge, was like the candy salad was an example. Are there other examples of the challenges that you saw while you were doing research?
Yeah, so I think the challenge format is something that's been around in social media for a very long time. This isn't a TikTok specific format. If you cast your mind back to the Ice Bucket Challenge, that was all over TikTok, not TikTok, Twitter,
the Facebook trend,
and Instagram, the Mannequin Challenge. So this format has been around a long time, and then trends within the format come and go. To give you a more specific answer to your question, in this particular data set, we saw a challenge around sour gushers. So you had a group of friends or a couple sitting together, and they were challenging each other or to eat progressively more and more sour candy and then not react. to try and keep a straight face, poker face. So yeah, that's another example of what we saw.
And an interesting way to think about trends too is I love what we're going through right now is like we have the umbrella trends, right? Kind of the big trends that last a long time, but even above that are the formats that create the umbrella trends that then create the micro trends that create the niche moments that people love. So it's a cool tier that we're diving into. Yeah,
exactly. Moving on, the next format number 2 of the 4 that we're going to talk through, perhaps unsurprisingly, taste tests were very popular in the snacking and the candy data sets. Key elements of taste tests is that it's a novel experience. So it's more often than not first time tasting of a new snack or a new product. It doesn't have to focus on taste. It can incorporate touch as well, or other sensory elements as well. And in addition to that, there's a cultural element here that's quite strong. People being exposed to not necessarily foreign cultures, but cultures that they're not particularly familiar with. In Q2, peelable candy, I don't know if you guys or any of the viewers have children or have tried this themselves. This is a really good example of the multi-sensory element at play here. So this is a relatively new candy concept, which has a soft gum wrapped in more of a pliable, also candy, also edible. But the idea is you can peel off the rubbery external layer, eat that, and then eat the soft internal layer. Swedish candy speaks to the cultural element. This is candy that is slightly more healthy. It's generally lower in sugar, less preservatives, very popular, as the name implies, very popular in Sweden and other parts of Europe. And now we've got US consumers tasting it for the first time and sharing their experiences on TikTok. In Q3, what we're seeing is egg flights. Now, for some of the British or UK viewers, you might be familiar with these. I think they're called deviled eggs. But this essentially is using an egg as a little mini edible plate and tasting various different combinations of flavors and things on top of the egg.
I have to say the creativity of the taste tests is it's incredible. I think, when like Twizzlers Pull and Peel first came out, I was like, wow, look at this experience, right? Like that's something different. And now we're putting two candies together, right, to create different textures and different feels. And I also think that, or one of the things we're also seeing is similar to our coffee and tea webinar we had a couple weeks ago, the health conscious snacking and candy is also showing face and becoming more and more relevant. So that's really interesting how they're crossing over.
Yes, Chris, it's a good point. There's definitely a section of this data that in the taste test in particular that speaks to people trying healthy snacks. Interestingly, though, the unhealthy or the less healthy snacks certainly in this data set, tended to get more views and more engagement.
Yeah. Then that also holds true with, we recently saw a report too that, especially in the UK, like sugary cereals and sugary cereals from like that made in America too are tend to trend higher than other types of cereals. So exact same thing.
Yeah. I think I don't know, people like stuff that's bad for them. Don't tell them it's bad for them. Because if you do, they're going to want to eat it.
Well, then you feel bad about eating it, and then you go back to the trauma dumping candy salad. All right, I'm going on mute.
There you go. Moving on to the next format number 3 that we want to talk through. I'm sure you are all familiar with this. because this is widespread across TikTok, and this is restocking. Okay, the restocking format has very much strong elements of OCD. Key elements here include organizing, so taking lots of different things and bringing structure to them, organizing them. And another key element, or very prevalent element in these videos, is ASMR. In Q2, we saw a lot of videos of parents restocking mini fridges for their children. These little mini fridges were often in the children's bedrooms, sometimes in kitchens, and they were dedicated to the kids. And you had parents putting snacks and stocking snacks into these little mini fridges. In addition to that, the Stanley Cup snack ring emerged. This was quite interesting and was a very good example of cross-category collaboration. You've got a Stanley Cup, which is not a snack and definitely not a candy, but starts appearing in a candy and snacking conversation because of a snack ring that people can balance on top of the Stanley Cup and then pack and order their snacks. Offered it's a really good example of the opportunity that cross-category collaboration may offer brands. You can not be a snacking brand or a candy brand and very much enter the snacking and candy conversation, and vice versa. If you're a candy brand and you want to enter, fast food conversation, there may be a collaboration opportunity there. Q3, this one really does speak to the OCD element in a way that doesn't really need much explanation. You've got the Snackle box, which is already quite OCD, and now you're putting in another layer on top of that, which is making sure every snack is the same color.
I mean, the name alone is gold, right? The Snackle box.
Yeah. It very, very popular. The Snackle box itself has been around on TikTok and has trended on TikTok long before Q2. But as I mentioned earlier, these things evolve and they keep kind of repeating, or not all the time, but we do see trends that get revived and I was going to say recycled, for lack of a better word, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've got a question that came in that we want to bring up. Again, you just highlighted a really interesting cross-category element there, the Stanley Cup, in the conversation. Have you seen any other unusual collaborations that cross over?
Yes, you won't believe some of them. Probably one of the most outrageous was the shoe company Crocs collaborated with KFC, a fast food company, to produce a croc that looks like not a chicken, but looks like a piece of chicken from KFC. Believe it or not, you can Google it. You will see some really bizarre Crocs that sold out in minutes, I believe.
I love it.
Yeah, another good example, but I suppose less outrageous, or maybe more outrageous, depending on who you ask. Heinz, the food company, collaborated with Absolute Vodka and made a vodka-flavored pasta sauce. Don't know if there was any alcohol in it, but it certainly, I believe, tasted like vodka.
So you actually just reminded me too. I think it was also Kraft Heinz that collaborated with Kate Spade, and they came out with like purses and clutches and like actually like fashionable items that did really well. So unbelievable.
How did I miss that? Oh man.
Yeah. And a far more contemporary or current example that I think is actually all over TikTok at the moment is Oreo and Coke. There is an Oreo flavored Coke available.
That
is really catching the attention of quite a few people.
That sounds delicious.
It does.
Yeah, there's Coke and Oreo. There's also so another trend. It like comes and goes. I'm not sure where it is in the cycle, and I haven't checked on it. But pickles and Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
So people are literally taking. They're going to Sonic. So specifically, the setting is Sonic, and then they're ordering pickles in a Dr. Pepper, and they're dipping pickles in Dr. Pepper, and they're flavoring the Dr. Pepper, and they're eating the pickles, and it's like this whole thing. And Dr. Pepper is one of those brands that leans really well into trends, just like across TikTok. Like they do ace it. So I think the collaboration, and when you're listening, and when you're actually like intelligently watching these videos, like you're doing here, Richard, as a brand, you see the ways that people are uniquely combining what they like. So maybe it's pickles and Dr. Pepper, or Oreos and Coke. And I'm not sure exactly where that came from, but maybe it was somebody that was like, I love to have a Coke with an Oreo, and like, bam, or I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I think that the collaboration, and just by listening and knowing where your audience is and what they care about, is going to create the Stanley Cup ring and an all blue Snackle box, or whatever it is that you're doing as a brand. So super smart.
Yes, definitely, Elizabeth. What we've seen in addition to that is, if you reflect on part of the discussion we had earlier, in that TikTok's DNA is this entertainment element. I think what brands are realizing is, by collaborating or partnering with companies that are completely outside of their realm or their industry, the more outrageous the collaboration, or the more unexpected the collaboration, often that is a better predictor of popularity on TikTok.
That's actually something.
It entertains people. It's an entertainment thing. It's not a functional thing.
Yeah, and our CEO, if you don't know her name's Chelsea Hall. She's amazing. She's probably here watching right now. But one of her taglines is always, in 2024, which is about to be 2025, so we got to change the slogan. But every company has to be an entertainment company, and the best ones give the mic to their customers. Sorry, Chelsea. I usually do a better job of that, but it's true. And that's exactly what you said, Richard. Like, everybody has to be this. And Paige in the comments just had mentioned, Chris had pulled up on the screen a second ago, but Wendy's is doing a collab with SpongeBob. And that's just like, it's hitting their market. Wendy's people love nostalgia. They love like the 90s, the cartoons. Like, it makes sense. So SpongeBob collab for the Krabby Patty. Like, that's going to be super interesting. And it's Wendy's and apparently Nickelodeon. They're listening.
Yep, exactly. I hope you have saved the best for last. The most popular format in the snacking and the candy conversation, by quite some distance, was how it's made. Okay. Key things about how it's made that make it so popular is that there is an element of consumer empowerment. So people being empowered to make their favorite snacks and their favorite food at home. Not only that, there's also an element of people wanting to replicate what they've seen on TikTok, popular trends on TikTok. They want to try and replicate. And most importantly, they want to adapt. To their personal preferences. And we've seen that play out in this quarter in quite an interesting way. Dubai chocolate. Okay. Dubai chocolate is a very expensive artisanal chocolate that is made in Dubai using Middle Eastern ingredients. Obviously, in addition to chocolate, using Middle Eastern ingredients, it uses tahini paste and pistachio paste, amongst many other ingredients. One of the key identifiers of Dubai chocolate is the very colorful exterior, the green and the yellow exterior. How this morphed into how it's made is quite interesting. People were ordering, contacting, there was one particular company in Dubai that was making this. They were quite clever in that they limited the supply, and they only, at the moment, I think they're only making 500 candy bars per day. That started much smaller, I believe, but very limited supply, very high cost. So instead of trying to buy the candy, people are trying to make it themselves, and they're sharing videos on TikTok on how to do that. Freeze-dried candy. This speaks to, well, this trend, I'll explain the trend a bit, is you take a piece of candy, you put it in the freeze dryer, you turn the freeze dryer on, and the candy expands and gets a lot bigger. It has elements of that, the kind of multi-sensory tactile element that we spoke about earlier in one of the other formats, in the taste test format. But there are a lot of people showing or publishing content about how to make this candy on TikTok. Q3. Now, this trend that is all over, and when I mean all over, it really is all over TikTok at the moment. I was going to say almost as big as very demure, very mindful, but I don't think it is. I don't think there's many things as big as that. But this how to eat a whole cucumber trend really took TikTok by storm. Okay. This video is of a guy who is slicing a cucumber using a mandolin into a big plastic container, and he throws in some balsamic vinegar. I think he throws in some pomegranate seeds and one or two other ingredients, shakes it up and eats it. Okay. It's the sort of thing that you wouldn't expect to trend, but my word, did it trend. What's happened, what we've seen, is that people are replicating it and they are adapting it to their particular flavor preferences. So they start with a cucumber, they slice it up, and then they add in all sorts of other ingredients to personalize it and make it more themselves. So much so that there was a literal cucumber shortage in Iceland, because Iceland imports all their cucumbers, but markets they were trying to import it from were sold out because of this trend, and people making cucumber salads on TikTok or from TikTok.
Wow. TikTok trends are officially affecting the supply chain. Wild.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of that. And I think this trend may have been influenced, and this is speculation, this is not by any means fact, but it may have been impacted by the heat waves in North America this summer. I suspect people wanting cold, fresh food, and that's what could explain why this really picked up in the way it did.
Interesting. And that's, I mean, even you're like, demure and mindful. There's literally, I watched a cucumber video about how to be mindful about eating a whole cucumber. Like, I think these, just to your point, like these trends, they grow into each other.
Which also, not to like do more recalls, but ties into the experience element that we've talked about with our coffee and tea webinar too, right? Where it's not just, I'm going to pour a cup of coffee and drink it and move on with my day. It's, I want to clear all these other things. So it's like this element of like, I'm not just going to eat a cucumber. I have to grab my chopsticks and I have to grab my like clear plastic thing and I have to be seated, seating. And it's
definitely,
there's an experience element here.
Yeah. There's an experience element. There's a homemade element, and there's an adaptation to your personal preference element. So yeah, Chris, you're spot on there.
DIY snacking. Didn't know what you think.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting to the end of this presentation. The question that I suppose is on a few people's mind is, so what? Okay. So what we've managed to do, or what we intended or set out to do, was to decode and structure what can be a very chaotic environment for people who don't frequently use TikTok, to understand the formats that are performing well, and within those formats, the trends that are topical at the moment. This particular graph gives you a view of, in the snacking data set, the formats graphed against engagement as well as views. You can see here just how popular how it's made is in snacking and in candy. The candy data set, or the challenge element in the candy data set, was far more prevalent in candy than it was in snacking. And I think that's because it speaks, or the challenge element speaks to the more playful element that candy embodies or encapsulates than snacking does. Data like this allows us to evaluate formats and trends against each other. It frames a conversation and allows you to actually use the information to make informed decisions and to identify opportunities. A good example of this is brands, and we did touch on this in the conversation earlier, but brands are very much appearing in the candy and the snacking conversation. We've got Gushers and Sour Patch and Oreos frequently featuring in taste tests, frequently featuring in taste tests. And we've got Nerds, Skittles, and Starburst also featuring both in the candy salad and in freeze-drying trends. Okay, so if you are always listening, paying attention, there are many opportunities to step into this conversation, but you need the context in order to be able to do that. I think that's all from me, but thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Richard, and to the rest of the Cogents team that had helped to pull this data together and surface through it. I think it's fascinating, what you all do and how deep you can go. We're talking a lot about how social listening and being like in on the conversation is important. It is so hard to do that. So it's not like, oh yeah, just watch TikTok and like then like that's not true, right? Like you need a team of people. Like that's what Viral Moment does, is like we give you this the data so that you can do that without having to literally scroll on TikTok, then get stuck in your own algorithm where maybe all I'm seeing are the happy candy salads and I never saw the trauma dumping portion of that. And like how tone deaf could you then be if that became part of like your marketing thing. So Viral Moment very, very much has made TikTok far more accessible for us. We've been operating in this industry for 15 years. We've used lots of different tools. Viral Moment allows us to really roll our sleeves up and dig into the data in a way that other tools haven't. It really is a cool tool.
Well, and likewise, Richard, thank you to you and the team, again, echoing Elizabeth, of just helping us make sense of the data. We're great at reporting the data and coming up with the numbers and engagement rates and all those things. But to see inside the numbers and to see who's actually talking about it, why they're talking about it, I think that's a big thing that we don't often get. Really appreciate the partnership.
Sure. Appreciate it too, guys. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you to everybody who stayed on and even stayed on a handful of minutes longer. I didn't even realize that, we're already at 53 minutes of live, which is great. So thank you to everyone who participated, who learned something. We'll send out not only this recording so you can relive all the fun, but also the deck that Cogents had made as well. So you can look through that and take some of those insights. We're always here to help. You can email us at hello@viralmoment.com. Feel free to reach out. We can also help you, of course, get in touch with Cogents. We'd love to have you be supplied with access help to decipher this data and understand what's best for you and your team, whether that's your analyst team, your marketing team, your executive suite, your product team. There's always like a portion of data and social listening, and especially TikTok videos and trending, that's really important to your company as a whole. So if you want to learn more, reach out. We're always happy to help.
And quick plug, Elizabeth and I are hitting the road. Coming up on October 3rd, we'll be at the Social Intelligence Lab Observe Summit. So if you're thinking about it, do it. We'll be there. Two people right off the bat. They're going to be there to say hi and meet and to chat about all the things that are happening in the industry. So thanks everyone for participating. We'll see you at the next one.
Thanks very much, guys. Have a good day.